Hey, folks, welcome back to the Land Fixer Podcast. I'm your host, Logan Swanson, and we are talking all about land on this podcast, investing in land, buying it as an asset, a hedge against inflation, land banking, development, subdivisions, creative deal structures, all sorts of fun and exciting things. Um, and today, our topic is going to be geared around the biggest problem with land investing. And that is ultimately the biggest issue you're going to run into when you are buying and selling this beautiful commodity is that eventually you sell the property. Okay, so that means it's not like other forms of investing, like commercial real estate or residential real estate, where you can hold on to that and cash flow as far as you can really imagine, at least. I mean, I don't know, modern construction, maybe those homes last 100 years, commercial buildings, maybe 200 years, something like that. But the life cycle on most land deals is much shorter. So you're going to have a piece of land that, if you're flipping it, you might own it for 3 or 6 months. You get a cash infusion, and then what do you have to do? You have to go use that money again, which is a good problem to have, and why a lot of people love the industry. But it actually scares other people away because they think, man, that is an endless headache. Always having to output money to input money, and it's not as some people think. Single family homes are safe and predictable. I don't know. I don't really see it that way, but to each their own. The biggest issue with land is eventually you lose the land. So today we're going to talk about a strategy which I think it's an investment strategy as old as time, I'm sure. But I think it's kind of underutilized in our industry, and that is land leasing. Okay. So I am no expert in land leasing, but it's something that I've had my finger on the pulse of for the past 2, 3 years. I've just never really found a property suitable to land leasing, but I also haven't really found all of the different strategies that you can use, or really try to identify the specific strategies for the specific properties. It's kind of just been this undercurrent, this thing that piques my interest from time to time, and I usually end up just walking away from it. But most people here in Texas, when they think about a land lease, they think about like running cattle or cutting hay. And that is probably the most common thing that land investors use it for. Um, but hey, let's start at the nuts and bolts. If you don't know anything about land leasing, I'm going to just go over what it is. All right. So, land leasing is effectively you own the land, and some other party, a person or a business, will pay you. They'll sign a contract and pay you either monthly or quarterly, or there's a bunch of different ways they would pay you, but they pay you for the use of your land. Typically, that is a very specific use of your land. It's a contractual agreement. Oftentimes, a broker or a real estate attorney is going to write it up for you. And my goal is in this podcast is to really show you the different types, some structures, some benefits, and how I think this could be something that if I was with the right mastermind and we really pursued this, I think you could probably eventually build up a whole business model just around leasing land. So the basics of land leasing is the there's it's mutually beneficial. Okay, so in any real estate scenario, ultimately we're all trying to be creative and scratch that itch. How can I make a deal look good for you and for me? So the way that that looks good for us is we own a single asset. Someone's going to be paying us at regular intervals for the use of that asset, and we never have to actually sell it to make our money. The benefit for someone who wants to come in and use that property is they don't have to output that large amount of cash up front to have access for the use of the property. Um, and that's usually a big deal because if it's say a farmer, maybe he doesn't have a bunch of money, but he has the ability to farm your field. Well, he can make extra money, utilize the equipment that he already has at hand, and pay you a much lower amount than he would if you had to go buy the property. He maybe he's doesn't have assets that he could leverage to go get a loan to buy the property. He doesn't have the cash sitting around, but he still wants more work and he wants more revenue, and this is the way to solve that problem. So, basics of leases. And there's tons of structures on how you can write a lease that we're going to get into next. If you're a creative thinker, you can probably come up with just about any sort of strategy around it. The most straightforward is like what's called a fixed lease. Okay, it's almost like rental, right? Typically, it's going to be a set monthly payment or annual payment that gets made directly to the landowner for the use of the property, no variables. And there's usually a date in which it expires that you would renegotiate to sign a new lease. Maybe your rates go up or they negotiate a lower lease or whatever. The next is a variable lease, okay? So this is when the lease rent is adjusted based on some sort of pre-agreed to conditions. So that could be, say for agricultural purposes, it could be contingent on the price of whatever is being harvested off of that property, because that varies. So say if hay prices go way up, well, you as the landowner and the leaseor, I think that's the right word, would make more money. Or it could be if they're able to harvest a certain amount, it kicks in some incentive. There's all these different ways where maybe they negotiate a lower fixed rate, but they say, hey, if we do well with this property this year, you will make more money. So then both parties are mutually incentivized to maximize the production of that property. You can also do what's called a percentage lease. So pretty similar insofar as the rate is variable, but usually it's going to be tied to, say, total revenue or crop yield, or, if it's a commercial lease, it might be amount of rents collected on the building that's established or whatever else. But it's going to be a set percentage of either total revenue or profits or something along those lines. Something that both parties could hand to an independent third party, like an accountant or a CPA, who could do all the numbers, and everybody knows what's due based off of this contract. Then we have ground leases. So a ground lease would be a long-term lease that allows the lessee to actually develop the land in a specific way. This is the aspect that I was most interested in. My ideal would be like, I'm going to go buy, 10 acres of land that has major road frontage. And then I'm going to go through the process of maybe developing it to a degree where I parcel off, 1.5 acre sections that have the best access for maybe fast food. Like Taco Bell wants to come in and pay me an annual lease, and then they build their Taco Bell on top of it. They do all of their stuff, and they don't even have to worry about buying the land. It's just built into their monthly cost. And on ground leases, there's different types of nets that you can use. So if you're familiar with commercial real estate, you'll know that there's single net, double net, and triple net. A single net is where the lessee is going to pay you your property taxes plus rent. A double net is where they're going to pay you property taxes, rent, and insurance. And then the triple net lease, which is the best of all leases and what I would definitely want if I was going to do any sort of ground lease in a commercial deal, is where the lessee is going to pay for all of the costs of the property, including taxes, insurance, maintenance, in addition to their rent. So for you as the landowner, you literally just hand them this 1 acre, 1.5 acre parcel and say, pay me. If you don't pay me, I take back whatever you improve. I'm sure it's more detailed than that. I have never been party to an agreement like this, but for me, that is the sort of thing that I would love, especially since we, my wife and I, we see land as an asset that we want to transition and hand off to our children. And unfortunately, I've seen it time and time again where somebody has a big portfolio of properties and then they hand it to their kids, and all their kids want to do is sell the land, which it's fine. It's something that should be sold and can be sold and moved about in our economy. It should happen that way. But if you hand your kids a developed commercial piece of land with triple net leases, ground leases in place, well, now you're handing your kids effectively what's a little cash flowing business with very little maintenance. So you can set them up for a really, really, really long time. And that also gives you the ability to sell that piece of land not at, say, a market land value, but as if it were a business, because anyone who would buy it from you is not only going to see the value of the land, but projected future revenues off of those leases. So it just adds a ton of value to the property while still just maintaining it being a piece of dirt. That's what we like. Um, a little further, there's a bunch of legal and financial considerations that I will in no way pretend to be an expert on. If you find you have a property like this and you want to partner with someone like me to add value in one way or another, please reach out. Or even if you have experience with this and you want to give me critical feedback or how it went for you, I'd love to hear about it. But when it comes down to like crafting your lease agreements, understanding tax implications, understanding liability insofar as insurance, well, that's something you really want to talk to professionals about. So talk to attorneys and things of that nature. I will not do that for you. Um, Negotiating land leases. This is honestly, this is probably something that for me, I would do it myself. But if you are less experienced, local brokers, real estate attorneys, I'm sure you could hire them to negotiate very effectively for you to get the best lease possible without dissuading someone from actually wanting to lease the property. That's the biggest issue. You make it too expensive, no one wants to lease it. Well, then you haven't really accomplished much of anything. And with the way that people want to own assets forever, like we're discussing here, I really think that leasing is going to get a lot more popular. So that is kind of the general basic overview, some of the implications, some of the structures around it. And next I want to get into maybe what you would call like types of land leases or actual use cases for leases. We've talked about a couple to date, but I put together kind of I wouldn't say a comprehensive list, but a pretty good list. So first you have your standard agricultural leases. Agricultural leases are actually pretty varied. It could be something as simple as, hey, I'll let your cattle run on my property and graze, and you don't have to pay me a dime, but that's going to maintain my ag exemption here in Texas, so that's good. But it could be someone doing crops. It could be someone, I don't know, any agricultural purpose you can think of, beekeeping, chickens, whatever. Somebody could lease your property for any agricultural purpose. There's going to be crop share leases. That's going to be similar to agricultural leases, but it's going to be based around the dividends paid on the yield of the crops as opposed to like that fixed rate model we talked about before. There's commercial leases. I know much less about commercial leases, and I think this is probably a really wide topic that I'd like to understand better. But a commercial lease could be as simple as, hey, I own the land, and somebody comes in and does a minor improvement. I know there's a business here locally. Hopefully I'm not giving away their secret. But what they'll do is they'll buy kind of difficult to determine, so they're odd shaped pieces of property. That's the best way to put it. Odd shaped pieces of property that are near highways and freeways. And what they'll do is they're going to lease it from the owner. They're going to come in, they're going to put in like 12-foot fences with razor wire on the top. They're going to have a gate that has a code to access. And they're just going to put gravel down on the entire thing. And all it's for is for long road truckers. Those truckers come in, they need a place to park, keep their stuff safe overnight. Maybe they want to go to a restaurant. That's a big issue. Everybody's trying to park at Walmart and things like that. Well, this is a dedicated place, and I think they offer a few other services. But they put a cash flowing business with very, very, very little improvements on top of somebody else's property. And it's a really great way to, and very niche way to make money off of land. So that's an example of commercial lease. I'm sure you could do all sorts of different things along those lines. Then you have your retail leases. This is for like a business that's going to sell goods or services directly to a consumer. So this could be like, you could lease your land to food trucks, right? Be like, all right, you pay me rent. You come park your food truck here. You sell your wares throughout the day. It could be, I don't know, anything like that. Any way that someone could set up a retail operation. This could even be retail centers. Like you could lease your property to someone who actually puts a store there. I imagine that might be a rare scenario, but I think it's possible. Then you have office leases. This is something, again, I don't think is super common, but I'm sure it does happen. Someone, instead of buying a property and builds office buildings on top of it, they lease the land and lower that huge capital expense up front, maybe because they need that money for the construction itself. and they're just kind of moving money around to make it most effective in whatever the deal is. There's industrial leases. Again, same sort of thing, but it's around manufacturing, warehousing, distribution. I think we're actually starting to see a lot of that in my area because of, everything is direct to consumer. So there's all these Amazon hubs getting set up all over the place. All you see is these huge tip-up concrete structures with a bunch of garage doors on the side, and that is the business, man. It's just moving things from A to B and having a place to organize it. Recreational leases. This is actually a pretty cool concept. Recreational leases could be something like primitive camping, right? So you could have a piece of property and you could work with somebody who has, like, I don't know, I think there's apps around it like Airbnb where you just go rent a campsite, and all they do is there's pieces of ground, maybe there's some logs rolled out and a campfire spot, and someone just books it on the app, 20-30 bucks a night, and then they go and camp there. But that's very varied. It could be they run their horses there, they go ATVing there, or whatever. You can have your land, someone puts a business or a service on top of it that is for recreational purposes, and off you go. The next one here is awesome. This is probably my favorite one, and one that I'm really trying to understand right now. And that's renewable energy leases. Okay, so landowners, this is getting very popular here in Texas. You can lease your land to a solar farm company. And what they're going to do is they're going to come in and drop a huge amount of solar panels on the property, and they're just going to harvest that sweet, sweet sun energy. And then they're going to pay you either a fixed rate or a variable rate depending on what they are able to harvest from the sun. And then finally, there's conservation leases. These are going to be agreements that are aimed at preserving natural habitats. Usually they're going to involve like a governmental agency or a nonprofit, or maybe there's like a billionaire philanthropist or someone who's like, I'm going to pay you to not develop your land. Because we love this dodo or this bluebird or rare species that exists on the property, and we don't want it to go away because of any sort of development that might happen in the future. So the whole idea is like, we're just going to pay you to not do anything with it. That's a pretty sweet deal to get into as well. So I hope you found this fascinating. I'm sure I could go on and on and on with this topic, but for our purposes here today, it's broad, okay? It's understanding that there is this whole other world of leasing with land. And hopefully it's another tool in your belt that you can use when you're looking at buying a property to put into your portfolio. What's something that checks as many boxes as possible? And for me, more and more it's coming around to like, how can this make money for me in the long term, or be a slow play with a longer return on money? So folks, as usual, if you want to get in touch with me, just send me an email, thelandfixer@gmail.com. If you need to add land to your portfolio, check us out at primelandexchange.com. We're about to have a huge influx of properties up there. Specifically, check out our spotlight deals. That's where you're going to find the best opportunities to buy an investment property. If you're an investor and you need funding, check us out at www.landpartnerfunding.com. You can find my social medias. They're all about Prime Land Exchange, yada, yada, so on and so forth. And finally, if you have property that is being underutilized currently, whether you think it has development opportunity, leasing opportunity, subdivision opportunity, whatever it might be, feel free to reach out to me if you need advice on it or you're looking to partner with somebody. We are able to bring a whole lot of value to almost any parcel. That's the skill set that I've been honing for the last 6 years now. And we found a solution to most problems, especially here in Texas. All right, folks, until next time, I love you. You're all beautiful, and we will talk very soon. Cheers.